My mother-in-law raised her wine glass at the head of the Thanksgiving table and smiled at 14 guests. "Before we eat," she said, "I think my son deserves to know exactly who he married." Then she lifted a cream linen portfolio from beside her chair and placed it in front of Donovan. I was 7 months pregnant. My hands were resting on my stomach. The room had gone quiet enough that I could hear the antique clock counting down the seconds. "My name is Jessica Winston. I am 33 years old. I had been married to Donovan for 2 years, and his mother, Skylar, had hated me from the first afternoon I walked into her foyer. Unknown to her, fate had already set its trap. As her eyes followed my husband's hand reaching for the portfolio she had so meticulously crafted, the cruel irony was that I had already trespassed into her sanctuary that morning, slipping into her bedroom while she sang unaware in the shower above. The portfolio she was about to open in front of God, her pastor, and her late husband's business partners had been opened by me first. The contents had been replaced. The papers she thought would destroy me were folded inside my coat lining in the hallway closet. What sat in front of Donovan now belonged to me. Skylar smiled at me across the candles. She thought she had won. She had no idea the camera in the corner of the dining room had been recording for 3 months. Before I tell you what was inside that portfolio, drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels by morning. I work as a senior marketing director for a healthcare brand in Boston. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. My father drove a delivery truck. My mother was a school nurse. They taught me 2 things: work hard and never raise your voice in someone else's house. I went to a state college, paid for it myself, graduated with honors, and built a career one careful step at a time. By the time I met Donovan, I was running my own team and signing my own lease. I did not need rescuing. I was not looking for old money. I was looking for a person. Donovan and I met 3 years ago at a charity event for children's hospitals. He laughed at one of my jokes. I noticed he laughed with his whole face, the way honest people laugh. Within 6 months, we were engaged. He came from a different world. His family had a name in Boston that opened doors I had never seen before. His grandfather had built a shipping company. His father had grown it into a small empire, and his mother had spent 40 years making sure everyone remembered who the Winstons were. That weight was about to land on me. His father, Xavier, popularly known as Citizen X, was kind to me from the first dinner. He took me aside that night in the library, poured me a small glass of port, and told me his son had finally chosen well. He said it quietly, the way men say things they do not want their wives to hear. Xavier was the only Winston who treated me like family from the start. He read the marketing reports I worked on. He asked me about my parents. He sent my mother a basket of pears from his orchard on her birthday every year without telling me. Skylar smiled through all of it. She smiled at our engagement dinner. She smiled at my bridal shower. She smiled the morning of the wedding when I came down the aisle in a dress I had paid for myself. The smile never reached her eyes. 6 months after our wedding, Xavier died of a heart attack at his desk. The funeral was the largest I had ever attended. Senators came. Pastors flew in from 3 states. Donovan held my hand through every speech. I cried for Xavier the way you cry for a father. Skylar did not cry. She received condolences with the steady grace of a woman who had been preparing to be a widow for a long time. From that day forward, she decided I was the problem in her son's life. The first Sunday tea was 9 days later. Skylar Winston did not yell. She did not slam doors. That would have been beneath her. Her cruelty came in soft, precise sentences delivered over tea in china cups that had been in the family since 1912. The first one came 2 weeks after we returned from our honeymoon, the Sunday after Xavier's burial. She poured my cup, smiled, and said, "I do hope you are not planning to keep working much longer, dear. The Winston wives have always understood that running a home is a full-time calling." I smiled back and said I loved my job. She said, "Of course you do. It must feel important." Then she changed the subject to her gardener's roses. I drove home that afternoon and replayed the sentence in my head. I told Donovan about it that night. He sighed. He said his mother was just lonely after his father's death. He said she would warm up. She did not warm up. She froze harder. The next Sunday, she asked me whether my college had been an accredited one or one of those online programs. The Sunday after that, she complimented my mother's casserole at the rehearsal dinner, then added that it had been very brave of her to bring something homemade to such a formal event. The Sunday after that, she suggested I might consider a softer hairstyle, something less aggressive. Each cut was small. Each cut bled. For a year, I told myself she would adjust. I told myself grief made people sharp. I told myself that the woman who had raised the man I loved could not be entirely heartless. I was wrong about all of it. Donovan and I had been trying for a baby for almost a year before it happened. 2 pink lines on a Tuesday morning in our bathroom. He cried. I cried. We waited until month 4 to tell anyone when the doctor said we were safely past the risky weeks. We told Skylar over Sunday tea. I had baked a small cake with 2 tiny booties on top. Donovan beamed. I held my breath. Skylar set down her teacup. She looked at the cake. She looked at my stomach. Then she said 2 words, so soon. She did not say congratulations. She did not stand. She did not hug her son. She said, so soon, and then asked whether we had thought through the impact on Donovan's career trajectory. Donovan laughed nervously and said the timing was perfect. I said nothing. I drove home that afternoon with my hand on my stomach, telling my baby I was sorry for the room I had just brought her into. That was the moment Skylar decided I was no longer just a problem. I was a threat. The next Sunday, the chamomile arrived. By month 5, the Sunday teas changed. Skylar started inviting only me. She said Donovan was working too hard. She said it was a chance for the 2 of us to bond, woman to woman, mother to daughter. She made a special chamomile blend she said was good for expectant mothers. She called it her grandmother's recipe. She kept it in a small glass jar with a handwritten label. She poured my cup herself every time before I even sat down. Within 20 minutes of drinking it each week, I would feel my eyelids growing heavy. My speech would slow. I would forget what we had been talking about mid-sentence. Skylar would smile and say it was the pregnancy hormones. She would walk me to my car. She would tell me to drive carefully. I came home foggy. I slept 14 hours. Donovan started to worry. Then Skylar started to worry to him. She would call him after each visit and say things like, Donovan, your wife seems unwell. She forgot her own name today. Or, Jessica mentioned again that she is not sure she wants this baby. I never said that. I never said anything close to that. Donovan began watching me more carefully. He started asking about my appointments. He asked if I had thought about therapy. The man I married, who used to bring me tea in bed, now looked at me like a stranger. Something was very wrong. By month 6, Skylar had begun telling other family members that Donovan had married a fragile woman. She told her bridge club that I was struggling. She told the pastor's wife that she worried for the baby. She told her oldest sister, on a phone call she did not bother to take into another room, that the baby would probably be born unwell because of my nerves. Then she dropped the line that broke me. She told my sister-in-law Patricia at a luncheon that she was not even sure the baby was Donovan's. Patricia called me that night, crying with a kind of glee disguised as concern. Jessica, she said, is there something you need to tell my brother? Mom says you have been distant lately. She says you have been seeing a man at your office. I sat on the floor of my closet and listened to her speak. I did not defend myself. I did not cry. I let her finish her speech. Then I told her I would call her back. I never did. I sat there in the dark for an hour. My baby kicked once, soft and steady, like she was checking on me. I put my hand on my stomach. I made her a promise. I told her that whoever was doing this to her mother would not get to do it for 1 more month. Then I started thinking. That night, Donovan was working late. I sat alone in our kitchen with the empty cup of chamomile. Skylar had sent home with me in her grandmother's small glass jar. I had been about to brew a fresh cup. I stopped. For the first time in 5 months, I really looked at the jar. The color of the loose leaves was slightly wrong. It was darker than chamomile should be, a brownish green instead of a soft yellow. There were tiny white specks throughout that I had assumed were dried flower petals. They were not flower petals. I lifted the jar to my nose. Underneath the sweet floral smell, there was something else. Something faintly chemical. Something I had smelled before in the medicine cabinet of every drugstore I had ever walked past. I poured the contents into the sink and washed it down with hot water. I rinsed the jar 3 times. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the empty jar for a long time. I thought about every Sunday. I thought about every fog. I thought about every phone call Skylar had made to my husband. I thought about Patricia's voice saying, "Mom says you have been seeing a man." I was not losing my mind. I was being walked toward losing it by a woman in pearl earrings who poured tea with a steady hand. Then I thought, who else knew? The next morning, our housekeeper Marisol arrived. Marisol had worked for the Winston family for 19 years since before Donovan started high school. Skylar had loaned her to us when Donovan and I bought our home. Marisol was quiet, kind, and the only person in that family who ever asked how I was actually doing. That morning, she set down her bag, looked at me carefully, and said in a low voice, "Mrs. Jessica, can I speak with you privately?" I closed the kitchen door behind us. I sat down. I told her I was listening. Marisol pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady. She showed me a series of voice memos. Each one was dated. Each one was a recording of Skylar on the phone in her kitchen, talking to someone she paid in cash to create text messages on a burner phone connected to my number. There were 11 recordings. Marisol whispered, "She offered me $5,000 2 weeks ago to throw away your tea jars without looking at them." I told her yes. I did not throw them away. I kept them. They are in my closet. I sat down very slowly. Marisol was not finished. She looked at me with the tired eyes of a woman who had carried a secret for too long. "Mrs. Jessica," she said, "she did this to the first one too." "The first what?" I asked. "The first wife." There was a first wife. I did not know. Marisol told me the story over coffee neither of us drank. Donovan had been married once before at 24 to a woman named Elena. Donovan had been young, in love, and certain. Elena had been a nurse from Worcester whose father was a mechanic. Skylar had hated her. Within 18 months, Elena had developed what Skylar called nervous troubles. She had started forgetting things. She had started sleeping in the afternoon. She had started crying at family dinners for no reason anyone could name. Skylar had told everyone, in her quiet, sympathetic voice, that Elena was simply not strong enough for the Winston life. Elena and Donovan had divorced quietly. Elena had moved back to Worcester. Donovan had buried the entire chapter so deeply that I had been married to him for 2 years and never heard her name. Marisol had worked in the house through all of it. She had watched Skylar make Elena's tea every Sunday. She had watched Elena fade. She had been too young, too afraid, and too dependent on her job to say anything then. "I should have spoken 19 years ago," Marisol said. "I am speaking now." She slid her phone across the table. "Take everything. Use it. I have copies." I took the phone. I had a name now. A pattern, a witness. I had a war to plan. That night I did not tell Donovan. I could not. Not yet. He had loved Elena. He had buried her in his own way. If I came at him with a story about his mother and his first wife and chemical fog in pregnancy tea, he would hear it as a wife losing her mind, which was exactly what Skylar had been preparing him to hear. I needed proof he could not argue with. I drove that night to a 24-hour urgent care across town. I told the intake nurse I had reason to believe I had been dosed without consent. I asked for a full toxicology screen. I gave them blood. I gave them urine. I paid in cash so it would not appear on insurance Skylar had ever paid for. The doctor was a cautious young woman with kind eyes. She did not ask many questions. She wrote 3 sentences on my chart and ordered the panel. 2 days later, the results came back to my private email. Trace levels of an over-the-counter sleep aid. Diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in nighttime cold medicine. Not enough to harm the baby. Not enough to register on any standard prenatal panel. But more than enough to make a woman my size foggy, slow, forgetful, and easy to gaslight. I printed the results 3 times. I put 1 copy in my office safe. Then I called a lawyer. I did not call any lawyer. I called Xavier Winston's lawyer. His name was Andrew Greer. I had met him exactly once at the wake, where he had pressed my hand and told me Xavier had spoken of me often. I had taken his card out of politeness and slipped it into my desk drawer. It had been sitting there for almost 2 years. He took my call within 15 minutes. When I told him my name, his voice changed. "Jessica," he said. "Your father-in-law called me a month before he passed. He left an envelope here for you. He said you would come asking questions one day. He told me when you did, I should give you everything inside. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. What is in it? I asked. Mrs. Winston, he said gently. I think you should come read it yourself. Andrew Greer drove the envelope to my office that afternoon. He met me in a small conference room on my floor and closed the door himself. He set the envelope in front of me. It was thick. The seal was Xavier's wax stamp, the one I had seen on his Christmas cards. Take your time, he said. I will wait outside. I sat there alone for a long minute before I broke the seal. What was inside changed everything. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a copy of the prenuptial agreement Donovan and I had signed before our wedding. I remembered signing it. I had read it carefully at the time. It was standard. Or so I had thought. There was a clause near the back in small print that I had not read closely. It had been added by Xavier himself, in his own hand, 3 days before our wedding. The clause voided any inheritance benefits, distributions, or trust access to any family member proven to have interfered with our marriage through documented fraud, deception, or harm. It named no one. It did not need to. The second document was a handwritten letter from Xavier. Jessica, it began. If you are reading this, it means my wife has done what she did before. Elena was a sweet woman. I failed her. I told myself my wife was simply difficult. I let it pass. I will not let it pass with you. I have set up the clause. I have left instructions with Andrew. The trust will obey it. Protect yourself. Protect your child. I am sorry I am not there. I would have stood beside you. Xavier. I read the letter 4 times. I did not cry until the 3rd reading. Xavier had known. He had seen it coming. He had built the trap before he died. All I had to do now was bait it and spring it in front of witnesses. I did not tell Donovan that week. I did not tell him the week after. I needed evidence so complete that even a man who loved his mother could not look away from it. I called a private security company. I told them I needed small, discreet cameras installed in our home, in places no one would think to look. The bookshelf, the kitchen herb rack, the corner of the dining room where Skylar liked to set her purse during her visits, the kitchen counter where the kettle lived. I asked for high-definition, 24-hour recording with cloud backup that only I could access. I paid for the premium service. I did not put it on a joint account. The technician finished the install on a Wednesday. By Sunday, I had my first recording. Skylar arrived at 1 in the afternoon for tea. I was working in my office. She let herself in with her key. She walked straight to the kitchen. She put her purse on the counter beside the kettle. She opened her purse. She took out a small dropper bottle. She uncapped it. She put 8 drops into the chamomile tin she had brought me a fresh batch of 2 weeks earlier. She capped the bottle. She returned it to her purse. She washed her hands. She had been doing it in my own kitchen the whole time. The footage was perfect. Marisol agreed to bring me every recording, every voice memo, every photo she could safely capture from Skylar's home. We met every Tuesday at a coffee shop 10 minutes from the Winston estate. She brought a USB drive. I brought cash. We never spoke for more than 15 minutes. I went to Skylar's house twice a week alone, exactly as before. I sipped only water. I poured the chamomile into the potted fern beside her chair when she turned her back. I let my speech grow slower. I let my eyelids grow heavier. I let Skylar believe she was winning. She grew bolder. She began reaching for the dropper while I sat 10 feet away. She stopped, hiding the bottle inside her purse, and started keeping it in the side pocket of her cardigan. She started leaving the door cracked open when she dosed the kettle. She had become so confident in her invisibility that she had stopped checking for witnesses. The cameras caught all of it. Skylar called Donovan one evening in early November and told him she was preparing something he needed to see at Thanksgiving. She told him she had hired a private investigator. She told him she had proof. Donovan told me that night. His voice was tight. He said his mother was being dramatic. He said he loved me. Behind his eyes, the doubt sat there, waiting. I started preparing. Andrew Greer helped me draft a portfolio of my own. We met 3 times in his office over the next 2 weeks. He went over each document with the care of a man who had spent 30 years in courtrooms. Inside the new portfolio I assembled were 6 things: the toxicology report from the urgent care, with the doctor's signature and the lab letterhead, a USB drive with 12 weeks of camera footage from my own kitchen, edited into a 4-minute supercut by a discreet technician Andrew recommended. The voice memo recordings Marisol had taken from inside Skylar's home, transferred to a second USB. A signed and notarized affidavit from Marisol describing the bribe Skylar had offered her, dated and witnessed. A copy of the prenup clause Xavier had written with the relevant section highlighted in yellow. A letter from Andrew Greer himself, addressed to Donovan as primary trustee, summarizing all of it in 2 clear pages and citing the trust provisions that would be triggered the moment Donovan acknowledged the contents. I bought a portfolio that looked almost identical to the one Skylar carried to family events. Cream linen, silver clasp, embossed corner. Skylar had given me one similar to it as a wedding gift and never noticed I had not used it. Now I would use it. I rehearsed the morning of the swap 3 times in my head before bed. Thanksgiving was 4 days away. I drove to Skylar's house at 9 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day. The sky was a bright autumn gray. The maples on her drive had dropped their leaves into red drifts along the gravel. I parked behind the kitchen. She opened the door before I knocked. She looked surprised to see me. "Jessica," she said, "you are early." I smiled, the soft, tired smile I had been wearing for months. I wanted to help with the table settings. The doctor told me to stay active. She studied me for a moment. Then she stepped aside. "How thoughtful, dear." She made me a cup of tea. I held it. I did not drink it. She told me she wanted to shower and dress before the guests arrived. She would only be 20 minutes. I told her to take her time. The moment I heard the bathroom door close upstairs, I was moving. Her bedroom was at the end of the hall, the door slightly ajar. The cream linen portfolio was sitting on the velvet chair beside her closet, her initials embossed in small gold letters at the corner. Exactly where Marisol had said it would be. I had 22 minutes. I unbuckled the silver clasp just enough to lift the top page. A printout of fake text messages, formatted to look real, between me and a man named David. I did not read further. I started the swap. I lifted out her papers in one stack and slipped them into the inside lining of my coat, which I had unstitched along one seam 2 nights earlier and were sewn loosely with a slip pocket. The papers fit smoothly inside. The coat showed nothing. I lifted my own portfolio from my tote bag. I opened it. I lifted the contents in one stack. I placed them inside Skylar's portfolio in the same order. The Bay toxicology report on top, exactly where her fake text printout had been. I refastened the silver clasp exactly as it had been. I checked the angle of the portfolio on the velvet chair. I matched it to the photo I had taken on my phone the moment I walked in. I went back downstairs. I rinsed her teacup. I poured the chamomile down the sink. I refilled the kettle with fresh water from the filtered tap. I walked the salad forks to the dining room and began setting the table at every place. Skylar came down 12 minutes later in her pearl earrings, a navy silk dress, and the small gold cross her mother had left her. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn to my wedding. "You are an angel for helping," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. I smiled, of course. She walked into the kitchen and saw the teacup, clean and dry. She did not pause. She had no idea. By 6 in the evening, 14 people were seated at Skylar's Thanksgiving table. Donovan's brother Charles and his wife Beth. Patricia and her husband Greg. 2 of Xavier's old business partners, Robert and his wife Jean, and James, who had come alone since his wife had passed in the spring. A cousin from Connecticut named Helena, who flew in every year. Skylar's pastor, Reverend Caldwell, who had served the Winston family for 30 years. Skylar's oldest friend, a woman named Margot, who had introduced Skylar to Xavier in 1972. Donovan sat at her right. I sat across from her, my hands folded over my belly. Skylar had sat me directly opposite herself, in the seat she always reserved for the person she planned to interrogate. Donovan reached under the table and squeezed my hand. He whispered, "Are you all right?" I nodded. I squeezed back. The first courses came out. Roasted squash soup. A green salad with pomegranate. Marisol moved quietly between the kitchen and the dining room, carrying plates with the practiced calm of a woman who had served 20 Thanksgivings in this exact room. Marisol caught my eye once as she set down the bread basket. She gave me the smallest nod. The clock on the mantel struck the half hour. Skylar set down her napkin. She lifted her wine glass. She tapped the rim with her silver knife. The room went quiet. "Before we eat," Skylar said, her voice carrying down the long table, "I think my son deserves to know exactly who he married." The smile was on her face. The smile she had worn the day she said, "So soon." The smile she had worn at the wake, at the wedding, at every Sunday tea. The smile that did not reach her eyes. The room turned toward her. Patricia's fork paused above her plate. Robert's wife Jean glanced at her husband. Reverend Caldwell folded his hands. Schuyler lifted the cream linen portfolio from beside her chair. She placed it in front of Donovan with both hands, ceremonious, almost tender, the way a priest places a holy book. "Read it, sweetheart," she said. "I am sorry. I would not bring this to you tonight if I were not certain." Donovan did not move. He looked at the portfolio. He looked at me. I held his gaze for one long second. I nodded once. He unbuckled the silver clasp. He opened the cover. The first page was the toxicology report, the lab letterhead, my name, the date, the list of substances detected in my bloodstream during my second trimester of pregnancy. Donovan's face did not change for a full 3 seconds. Then it changed. He looked up at his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice flat. "What is this?" Schuyler's smile cracked at the corners. "That is not what I gave you," Schuyler said. Her voice had risen by half a step. The room had not noticed yet. "I know," Donovan said. He turned the next page. A still from the camera in the dining room corner. Schuyler standing beside the kitchen counter, her hand holding the small dropper bottle, the kettle in the foreground. Patricia leaned forward and looked at the image. Her mouth opened. She did not speak. Donovan turned the next page. A second still. Schuyler uncapping the bottle. A third. Schuyler squeezing 8 drops into the chamomile tin. A fourth. Schuyler washing her hands at the sink. He turned the next page. A printed transcript of one of Marisol's voice memos. Schuyler on the phone, in her own kitchen, instructing a man to send fake text messages from a burner number. The man's voice was redacted. Schuyler's was not. He turned the next page. Marisol's signed and notarized affidavit. 2 clean pages. Her signature at the bottom. A notary stamp. A date. Reverend Caldwell set down his wine glass. The small clink it made on the china seemed to fill the room. Schuyler's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. She tried to speak. She tried to reach for the portfolio. "Donovan," she said. "Stop. Please stop." Donovan did not stop. He turned the next page. And the next. And the next. The kitchen door swung open. Marisol stepped through it carrying a covered serving dish. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. She was wearing the same gray uniform she had worn to the Winston Thanksgiving table for 19 years. She set the dish on the sideboard. She did not leave the room. She stood at the edge of the wall, her hands folded in front of her apron, and she looked directly at Schuyler. The dish was empty. We had agreed on the prop the week before. Schuyler saw her. The recognition flickered across her face. She understood in that moment that the affidavit on the page in front of Donovan was real. She understood that her bribe had failed. She understood that the woman she had trusted to be invisible for 19 years had been watching the entire time. Patricia whispered, "Mom, what did you do?" Schuyler did not answer Patricia. She looked at me. "Jessica," she said, "what have you done?" I stood. The candles flickered. My hand stayed on my stomach. My voice was even. "I drank the tea you gave me for 6 months," I said. "I went to a doctor. I have the lab work. I have the recordings. I have a witness. I have a letter from your husband. And I have the clause he wrote into our prenup 3 days before our wedding." Schuyler sat down hard. The doorbell rang. Marisol moved to answer it. She returned 30 seconds later with Andrew Greer, who walked into the dining room with the quiet authority of a man who had walked into difficult rooms his entire career. He carried a slim leather case file under one arm. He nodded to Donovan. He nodded to me. He did not look at Schuyler. "Mr. Winston," he said, addressing Donovan by his married name, the name he had inherited from his father. "Your father instructed me to deliver this in this exact circumstance. I have waited 3 years to honor his request." Andrew opened the case file and removed a sealed envelope. He handed it to Donovan. Donovan set down the portfolio. He took the envelope. He broke his father's wax seal. He read the letter inside. He read it twice. Then he passed it to Robert, his father's oldest business partner. Robert read it. His expression did not change. He had been a trustee of the Winston Family Trust for 40 years. He knew exactly what the letter meant. He looked across the table at Schuyler. His voice was quiet. "Schuyler," Robert said, "per the trust your husband structured, your monthly distributions are suspended pending review. Your access to the foundation accounts is frozen. The clause has been triggered. We will convene the trustees Monday morning. Skylar's pearl earrings caught the candlelight as her hand began to shake. Donovan did not yell at his mother that night. He did not even raise his voice. He stood up slowly. He walked around the long table. He took my coat from the back of my chair. He held it open for me. He helped me into it, the way he had helped me into it on our first date. He turned to the room. "My wife and I are going home," he said. He took my hand. He led me out through the front hall. Marisol followed us with my purse and Andrew's case file. We did not look back. The last thing I heard, as the front door clicked shut, was Reverend Caldwell quietly asking Patricia to please pass him the water. We left Skylar sitting at the head of her own Thanksgiving table, while 14 guests stared at the portfolio she had thought would destroy me. In the car, Donovan drove for 10 minutes without speaking. Then he pulled over on a quiet residential street, put the car in park, and turned to me. He did not apologize for his mother. He did not apologize for himself. He did one better. He put his hand on my stomach. He looked me in the eye. "I should have seen it," he said. "I am so sorry I did not see it. I will spend the rest of my life seeing you." I cried then, for the first time in months. The next morning, Andrew Greer filed a formal request with the trustees. Within 3 weeks, Skylar's monthly distributions were permanently revoked. She was forced to sell her summer house in Maine to maintain the estate. The Winston Foundation, which she had chaired for 20 years, replaced her with Patricia, who has not returned her mother's calls since the day the trust voted. Helena, the cousin from Connecticut, wrote me a long letter apologizing for every cold dinner she had ever sat through and said nothing about. Reverend Caldwell sent a card from the church saying he was praying for our family and for our daughter. Margot, Skylar's oldest friend, did not write. Marisol gave her notice from Skylar's household the following Monday and came to work for us full-time. She has her own apartment above our garage now, paid for by Donovan. She made the curtains in the nursery herself. We named our daughter Willa, after her grandfather. She was born healthy in February, 6 pounds and 12 ounces, with my eyes in Donovan's slow, honest smile. Skylar has not met her. She has sent 3 letters and a small silver rattle. The rattle is in a closet. The letters are in a drawer. Maybe one day I will read them. Maybe one day I will not. Some doors do not need to be opened just because someone is finally knocking. The cardinal on Xavier's old window feeder still comes every morning. If you were sitting at that Thanksgiving table, would you have stopped her at the very first sentence, or let her read every page out loud? Tell me in the comments.